الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. All praise is due to Allah, and after that, all praise is due to Allah. We thank Him, we ask help from Him, we ask guidance in Him, and we seek forgiveness in Him from our own evils and from our own bad deeds. Anyone who has been guided by Allah, they will be guided. And anyone who has been misguided by Allah, you will never find a guardian to guide them. I bear witness. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except for Allah, the only one without partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his servant and his messenger. To proceed forward. So, most of you probably haven't seen me for a little while. There's been a lot of changes that we've had in our family. For the most part, alhamdulillah, we made a successful transition back from Kuala Lumpur to the United States. And although I'll be coming here back and forth, this kind of change has been a little bit more difficult on my children. In new schools, my son actually started university. And throughout this transition, which is actually still in the process of playing itself out, there's many times when we were going back and forth I was going back and forth with my kids, and there were times of frustration, and I just wanted to kind of, maybe yell at them and say, whatever you're going through, just get over it, because I'm going through the same thing, and I'm not complaining about it or doing anything along those lines. And then as I was thinking about doing that, I remembered the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said that the best of you is the best to his family, and I am the best to my family. So I know many times that this hadith is when it's talked about, it's actually referring to the relationship between the husband and the wife. But because the Prophet ﷺ says family, I thought in this particular context it was very, very appropriate to be able to use it from the context of children as well. And a very famous hadith that I'm sure your mothers have recited to you over and over again, maybe not so much your fathers. Abu Huraira reported that a man asked the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, "Who is the most deserving of my company?" And the Prophet responded back and said, "Your mother." And the man asked, "Who next?" And the Prophet said, "Your mother." And then he said, "Who next?" And the Prophet again said, "Your mother." And finally, when he said, "Who next?" the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded back and he said, "Your father." So today, what I wanted to focus on is this last part of the hadith, which is this aspect of fatherhood in Islam. As I was doing my research for this topic, and I tried to look up hadith specifically in regards to the fathers, and where there was no mention of the mother. And to be honest with you, in the non-exhaustive search, I didn't do everything, but whatever search I could find, there weren't very many hadith, if at all, that I was able to find, where it only mentioned the father and not the mother. Most of the time it's the mother, and at the other times it's both the mother and the father, as parents or something along those lines. And I found that to be very, very interesting. And the more I thought about it, I began to think about why is it that is the case, that a mother is mentioned and not the father. And my conclusion was that during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and even sometimes in societies today, a father already has a very high status. Especially even in Islam, has a very high status. For example, he's the breadwinner in the house most of the time. The lineage of children come from the father. When you give somebody a kunya, Abu so-and-so, or you talk about like Ibn so-and-so or Binti so-and-so, you always refer to the father, not the mother. And so there was already a very high status for fathers in Islam. But it was the mothers or the wives that were not given that status. So when the Prophet ﷺ was talking, he wanted to elevate the status of a very, very prominent figure in the family, which was the mother. And so that's why you have over and over again this idea of teaching our community that the mother is very important, because the father has already that importance within a child's life or within the family's life. So, so now going back to as we're going through this transition, that I mentioned at the very, very beginning, I began to think about what it means to me to be a father. And as you know, maybe some of you know, but I always talk about my own experiences, and that's how I share, that's how I learn. And so, it's nothing that's now I'm trying to teach you. It's something that I learned for myself, and I'm just trying to share exactly what it is that I thought about when I was thinking about this idea. That how should I be with my kids? And what type of relationship, what I like to have with them as they're growing into adulthood. And I wanted to remind myself again, about this, about what Islam teaches. And so I wanted to try to give two examples, inshallah, from the Quran. And we have this beautiful relationship between a father and a son in two succinct places. Number one is giving counsel and advice to your children, right? The story of Luqman is a very, very good example where he's giving his advice from Luqman to his son. The story begins with Luqman addressing his son with the term of endearment. When he addresses him, right, he doesn't say, hey you, or get over here. Right? The word that's used in the Quran is ya bunayya, which means like, oh my beloved son. It's a term of endearment, a term of love. You can kind of sense that if you just hear the word ya bunayya. And so that's how it starts, oh my dear son, and he says it out of love, not out of anger. When he's teaching him, it's not ever out of anger. And this happens throughout the Quran in other places as well. So Luqman wants the best for his son. And so he gives him the best of the advice that he knows. And so a lot of times, especially if you're growing up in this day and age, right, the first thing that's going to happen is the kids are going to have doubts about their Islam. This is a natural phenomenon that happens in this era. That they're constantly bombarded with atheism or non-religion, those type of things. And if they're comfortable with you, if you have that dialogue with them, they're going to come to you and ask you about it. And look exactly what Luqman says. It says in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala translates, it says, when Luqman said to his son, while he was instructing him, he said, Ya bunayya, do not associate anything with Allah. Indeed, association is the greatest of injustice. So rather than actually yelling, I dared not ever talk to my parents, or my parents dared talk to their father about the fact that they were thinking about this idea that there was no God. Because they probably would have either beat me, or yelled at me, or done something like that. And so here we have an example of even in one of the most gravest of sins that somebody can actually commit, which is shirk, or non-belief in Allah. Right? You have an example of Luqman giving advice in a nice way. And he basically is laying the foundation. He said, whatever you do, right? Whatever you do not associate anything with Allah. Indeed, association is the greatest of injustices. And then, as the story develops, right? The idea kind of came to me is like as my son was going off to college and he was living on his own, right? Or even when your kids go to school, they're not around you. They can easily be thinking of it as, I'll do everything that I want to with my parents, but when I'm out on my own, that's my time, and I'm going to do whatever I want. So what happens is people end up having a bipolar personality. They're one way with their families, and they're another way with their friends and their teacher and their students and their friends and those type of things. And so what does Luqman say about that? He says, Ya bunayya. He says, oh my son, indeed if wrong should be the weight of a mustard seed, and should it be within a rock, or anywhere in the heavens and the earth, Allah will bring it forth. Indeed, Allah is the subtle and the acquainted. Meaning, whatever you do, you're not trying to hide it from me. You have to be aware that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. Even if it's a weight of a mustard seed, and it's within a rock, anywhere in the heavens and the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to know. So whatever deeds you commit, right? Be it in front of Allah, not because your parents are asking you to do it, not because your friends are doing it, but because you have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then this is now this idea of him, this dialogue, right? There are going to be times when your kids go off on their own, and they're with their friends, and the last thing on their minds is going to be about salah, or prayer. Because either their friends are not praying, or they're not being encouraged, or for whatever reason. And so what does Luqman say? He says, Ya bunayya. He says, establish prayer, enjoin what is right and forbid what is evil, and be patient over whatever befalls you. Indeed, all that is of a matter is in determination. Right? So this is another advice to establish prayer. Aqim as-salah. And then he says, enjoin what is right. Amal bil ma'roof. Right? Do whatever is right in this world, you have to be able to do it, and then avoid the evil. Nahi anil munkar. Avoid the evil. This is the foundations of life that Luqman is teaching his sons. And now in the age of social media, when everything is about me and what I'm doing and how I look and my selfies and those type of things, in the age of social media, Luqman tells them and says, do not turn your cheek in contempt toward people and do not walk through the earth exultantly. Indeed, Allah does not like everyone self-deluded and boastful. Right? What a lesson to be able to learn. That we have to be one of those that is humble on this earth, not prideful, not self-delusional, self-indulgent, those type of things. But we have to be with those people that are not contempt with other people. Don't turn a cheek in contempt towards them. And then the other part of it, which is everybody now in social media as well and in other places, all they want to talk about is what their opinion is. Whether they are knowledgeable about that or not, you sometimes feel like saying I don't know is not a sufficient enough answer. And so what does Luqman say about that to his son? He says, and be moderate in your voice and lower in your pace and lower your voice. Indeed, the most disagreeable sounds is the voice or the braying of an uncle. Just basically blurting out whatever answer it is, whatever you think, because you just think you have to have an opinion on every single matter that comes across your desk or your table or in front of you. That's not the way to be able to do that. So again, I say this with all sincerity, that many times we're not very, very patient with our children. If my children were sitting here in German today, they would probably tell you, I'm the first one to be guilty of that as well. Right? They would bear witness and say that the advice that I'm sharing with you now, I should try to take on myself. And I don't doubt it. I know that's the case. But this is what I learned, so I'm just trying to share it with you. And then, when we give them the advice, we're not patient with them when we give it, but when we give them the advice, it's usually condescending. It's, I'm the father, you're the son, or you're the daughter, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is in the world that you're supposed to know, and you're going to listen, you're going to shut up, and you're going to follow. That's a condescending way to do it. And so that's typically how we end up being able to do that. But that's not how we find the stories in the Quran. In fact, in the stories of the Quran, there's actually a dialogue that happens. It's seeking of advice, even a father from the son. Right? In a very famous story about the dialogue that a son and a father have, we have Ibrahim and his son, right? We have a story of a father and a son when a big decision needs to be made in their life. We all know the story. We remind ourselves of it every Eid al-Adha, right? The bigger Eid. And it says in the Quran that when he, which is Ibrahim, reached with him, the son, the age of exertion, he said, "Oh my son," again, "Ya bunayya," right? Now this is a very, very heavy topic that he's going to be talking about. And Ibrahim could have easily said, "Hey, I want you to do this." Right? But he didn't. He starts off again with a term of endearment, "Ya bunayya," "Oh my beloved son, indeed I have seen a dream that I must sacrifice you. See what you think." And then the son replied back and he said, "Oh my father, ya abati," again, term of endearment, "Oh my beloved father, do as you are commanded, you will find me, if Allah wills, of the steadfast." Right? Now, let's think about this dialogue for a second. Ibrahim turns to his son for advice. And again, like the story of Luqman, Ibrahim turns to him with affection. When he says, "Ya bunayya," "Oh my beloved son." And one has to wonder, if you hadn't done that, right? If you would have said, "Hey, you, this is what we're going to do," imagine if Ismail would have said, "I don't think so. You kill me? That's not going to happen." Right? But that doesn't happen because there's already a relationship that's there between the father and the son. Imagine if you came up to your son and said, "You know what? For the past 3 nights, I've had a dream that I killed you." Imagine how your son would react. What is our relationship with our children? Right? It doesn't have to be that great. It could be anything. I just had a dream that I was going to put you in a boarding school. It could be whatever it is you want. When we have dialogues, it's usually we're talking down, but in this particular case, in the most serious of matters, there's a dialogue that's going on. And there's a reason, I felt important reason why this dialogue is actually there, right? So what happened to Ibrahim? Ibrahim actually knew that how his son would answer, because that's the relationship they had. But even though he knew it, he wanted it to come from him. It wanted him to be his idea. Now we talk about this in management school all the time, right? We talk about the fact that you get a group together and the best way to be able to convince people of an idea is make them think it's their own. And so in this dialogue, that's what Ibrahim is doing. He's having a dialogue. Look, this is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you think Ibrahim would have not done it? He would have done it. And yet he's still having a dialogue. And so he's having a dialogue because he's basically trying to convince Ismail that it is his idea. Right? Basically says, oh my father, do as you were commanded. Right? You will find me, if Allah wills, one of the steadfast. So this is the dialogue that's happening between them. And it didn't stop from the seeking of the advice, even though Ibrahim knew. Right? It is a conversation that reassures both of them their love for each other. It's both of them. Right? By getting an answer from Ismail alayhi salam, Ibrahim was assured that he raised him properly. Right? When Ibrahim says, I had a dream, this is what happened, and Ismail said, yeah, okay, you do whatever you're commanded, you're going to find one of this. Ibrahim's like, yeah, that's right. I did raise him properly. That's on one side. And then Ismail knew that his father loved him and would not do anything to harm him. So even though he said yes to it, he knew in the back of his mind this was never going to happen. But he went along with it. And whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded him to do, he was going to do it. So this is the dialogue that I'm talking about, that we need to be able to have very serious conversations with our children because they're facing serious issues in their lives. Right? And when I grew up, I never saw one person commit suicide. And just in the 4 months that I've been in the city that I'm at, there's already been 2 or 3 of them in a high school. This is 14 through 18-year-olds that are committing suicide. That's a serious matter. And if we can't talk to our children about these serious issues, then they're going to be lost. And we have to have it in the most serious of ways. So sometimes we should be seeking advice from our children, not for the advice, but to make them feel important. And at the same time, to find out if we've given them the good instructions of being able to raise them up on how to be good Muslims in their own lives. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله ولكم واستغفروه. الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. As I mentioned to you earlier, I wanted to be very, very clear that as I am giving this khutbah out here, this is more of a reminder to myself on how to improve my own relationship with my children. And my children would be, as I mentioned, the first ones to witness this actual fact. So the relationship of a parent or a father to their children, right, has to start from a very, very early age. But it's never too late. If you have very, very young kids, it's not too late to start. Even if you have older ones, we have to be able to have that kind of dialogue with our children. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentions that there's basically a young person's life is divided into 3 different stages. The first 7 years are about nurturing and playing and having fun and those type of things. And then the next 7 years are about teaching. And then the last 7 years are about befriending. Being friends with your children. Now both parents are involved with each different stage, let's be honest, right? Both parents have to be involved. But in reality what ends up happening is the father goes off to work, and he's not going to be the one changing the diapers. Right? Maybe once or twice, but he's not going to be the one doing it. It's usually the mother in the first 7 years that's going to be the one who's going to be nurturing. Right? Because that's the nature of the mother. But as a father, what we need to do in the first 7 years is to be able to establish a bond with our children through play, through spending time with them, so that when they come to the time of teaching and befriending, they're already on the same page with you. Right? They're already on the same page. Ibrahim and Ismail, there wasn't some nurturing going on. Remember, even though they were living apart, he used to come back and forth. And so that was the case that was happening. And so it's more, so the first 7 years is about, as a father, being able to play and spend time and those type of things with your kids. The mother's going to do the nurturing part. That's just, let's just face reality. And the next 7 years are about teaching. And that is maybe a joint relationship that a mother and a father can do. And the last 7 years, when they're, let's say, between 14 and 21, this is a befriending stage. And how many times, whenever something happens to your children, Right? How many times is it that the mother is the one that says, oh, it's okay. And the father's like, no, you're in trouble. And that's just the nature of the mother and father relationship. But we have to establish that at the age of 15, right, they are already young adults. And it's too late for us to try to whip them into shape. It's not going to happen. So we have to be able to have another way of being able to do that. We have many examples, as I mentioned, from the Quran in my first khutbah, that we can actually be able to do that. And the last aspect we should learn, right, is to love them and show them affection. Now this is also a trait that in our community, unfortunately, that we're lacking in. Right? And love can be shown in many, many different ways. And again here, we need to know who our children are and how they need to be loved. This is the relationship we have to have with our children. You know, some children need hugs. Others just need words. And yet others need service. There's a book actually that's written, it's called The 5 Love Languages. And now there's a book called The 5 Love Languages of Teenagers. I would encourage you to read that book because there are differences. You know, if one of your children who likes to be hugged, you can tell them every single day for the rest of their lives that I love you, and one day when they're going to go old enough, they're going to say, you know what, my dad never loved me. Because your maybe way of saying it that you love is not how they're perceiving it. So we have to know our children. We have to know exactly how they behave in different circumstances, and be able to react to them based on their level, not on our level. And so if your child loves to be hugged, you have to hug them every day. If your likes like to be shown to be able to do things for them, you have to do things for them every day. Spend time with them, cook for them, whatever it is that we need to be able to do. Right? And that's something that's very, very important. You know, Abu Hurairah, he said in the hadith, said the Messenger of Allah, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, he kissed Hassan ibn Ali. And in the gathering, there was a companion by the name of Al-Aqra ibn Habis al-Tamimi. Now, he basically, when he saw this, he was sitting there, and when he observed this, he said, I have 10 children, and I haven't kissed any one of them. That's what he said to the Prophet ﷺ. And the Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, he looked at him, and he said, whoever does not show mercy will not be shown mercy. Right? Whoever doesn't show mercy, he's not going to be showing you mercy. We have to have mercy and love, and we have to do things for our children. We have to love them and hug them and kiss them, or whatever it is that they need, we need to be able to do that for them. And also, you know, I can't, to talking about this issue, we have to also know how our kids are when it comes to how they actually behave. As I mentioned, every single child is different. And so, if your child is good in science, for example, right, then encourage that science and don't beat him up because he wasn't good at math or he wasn't good at history or anything along those lines. And if they're good at the arts, then encourage them towards the arts. And don't beat them up if they're not going to do well in science or math or anything along those lines. This is the nature of people. You have to be able to understand that. And you know, the Prophet ﷺ said that the wisdom is the lost property of a believer. Wherever he finds it, he should take it. And we have now in this day and age, right, hundreds of professors that have spent their entire lives researching how to be able to best raise their kids. How to best raise kids in the current day and age. We have to, that's wisdom. And we need to be able to possess it, use it, and take it and run with it. And that's what we have to be able to do. And now finally, I know there's some younger people in the crowd, and even some older ones that are even older, their fathers might still be left, so I can't leave this gathering before I tell a story, and inshallah I will close with that. You know, there was an old man, and he was sitting in the courtyard of his house, and his son was there. He was a little bit older, and who was now already graduated with a high education. And suddenly, as they were sitting there was a crow that comes and he lands on a porch. And when it lands, the father looks at the son. He says, "Son, what is that?" And the son says, "It's a crow, Dad." And after a little while, the time passed. Again, the father asked the son. He said, "Son, what is that sitting again on the porch?" And the son said, "It's a crow, Dad." And then a little bit more time passes, and again the father asks the same question. And now the son is beginning to get a little bit agitated. "Baba, I told you 3 times already. It's a crow. Hasn't changed." And so again, a little bit of time goes by, and then the father asks again, "Hey, what is that sitting on this porch again?" And the son gets really upset. He's like, "It's a crow, Dad. It's a crow." And so the father, he looks at his son, And he says, do me a favor. The son asks, what is it? He says, go up to the room, and in my room there's a desk, and in the desk there's a booklet, there's a diary. Can you please bring that down? And so the son goes up, and he brings the diary down, and he gives it to my dad. And the dad turns over to the page, and he gets to one particular one, and he says, son, can you please read this to me? And the son looks at it, and he reads. He says, today, my little son was sitting with me in the courtyard when a crow came there. And my son asked me 25 times what it was. And I told him 25 times exactly what it was, that it was a crow, and I did not feel at all any irritation. I rather felt affection for my innocent child. The father explained to the son the difference between a father and a son's attitude. While you were a little child, you've asked me this question 25 times, and I felt no irritation, but I answered you, and I didn't bother me at all because I knew that you were doing it out of innocence. And today, when I asked you this question only 5 times, you felt irritated, annoyed, and impatient with me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, He says, and your Lord has commanded that you shall not serve any but Him. I mean, not serve any but Allah. And goodness or kindness to your parents. If either or both of them reach old age with you, then say not to them a word of uff, nor chide them, and speak to them with generous words. And make yourself submissively gentle to them, and with compassion, and say, رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Oh my Lord, have compassion on them as they brought me up when I was little. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Oh my Lord, have compassion on them as they brought me up when I was little. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Oh my Lord, have compassion on them as they brought me up when I was little.